On a day when Donald Trump has quite literally scraped the very bottom of that dirty barrel in a desperate attempt to change the subject, for our part, we are not going to take the bait, because we got as clear an admission as any that Donald Trump has tried and failed to turn the page on the furor from his own supporters over Jeffrey Epstein. That news came in the form of an announcement that the Justice Department was reaching out to jailed Epstein associate and Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. Deputy AG Todd Blanche writing this, quote, at the direction of Attorney General Pam Bondi, I have communicated with counsel for Ms. Maxwell to determine whether she would be willing to speak with prosecutors from the department. I anticipate meeting with Ms. Maxwell in the coming days. Until now, no administration on behalf of the department had inquired about her willingness to meet with the government. That changes now. So who is Ghislaine Maxwell and how does she feature in the Epstein case? Well, Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. She was convicted in 2021 on charges of sex trafficking and other counts. Ahead of sentencing, prosecutors said this about her, that she, quote, preyed on vulnerable young girls, manipulated them, and served them up to be sexually abused by Epstein. But if the Trump DOJ, now seeking to meet with Maxwell, is a case of Trump thinking he's going to throw his very angry base of supporters a bone, the decision to talk to her actually raises more questions than it answers. Did Trump's Justice Department try to close the book on Epstein without talking to his closest confidant and associate? The New York Times reports that in April, quote, Maxwell asked the Supreme Court to hear an appeal of her criminal conviction. In her brief to the court, she argued that a 2007 agreement by federal prosecutors in Florida barred her criminal prosecution. Under the agreement, government lawyers agreed they would not prosecute any co-conspirator of Mr. Epstein. The Justice Department, in a reply brief, urged the justices to reject the appeal. The justices have not announced whether they will hear the case. Politico adds this reporting, quote, it also raises the question of whether Maxwell may try to leverage the meeting for a reduced prison sentence by telling the Justice Department what it wants to hear. The Trump administration's announcement that it is approaching Ghislaine Maxwell comes at a time when the public's fury shows no sign of dying down. Republicans are so eager to avoid the base's wrath that they have decided to cut and run, like literally. After saying yesterday that the Trump administration has to have space to do whatever it wants to do here, Speaker Mike Johnson today cut the House's work week short, skipping votes and sending lawmakers into a 5-week recess, a break, so can all avoid having to take a vote, forcing the Trump administration to release all the files in the Epstein case. Epstein's closest associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, now embroiled in Donald Trump's crisis over his handling of the Epstein files, is where we start today. New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is here. Also joining us, journalist and podcast host Tara Palmieri is here. Tara has hosted 2 investigative series on the topic called Broken, Jeffrey Epstein, and Power, the Maxwells. And rounding out our panel is our friend, former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst, Claire McCaskill. Glenn Thrush, let me ask you to first explain Todd Blanche's post in the Bondi X account early this morning. What was that? What does it mean? And where does it come from?
Well, it's really kind of strange. He started off by saying that the memo that they put out, the Justice Department and FBI, the joint memo they put out in early July, saying nothing to see here. The investigation is over. Jeffrey Epstein, in fact, as every other investigation showed, did in fact kill himself. He said that stands. That's the final word. But Attorney General Bondi, at the instruction, following the broad instructions of President Trump, has okayed some kind of a conversation with Ms. Maxwell. Why is this confusing? Because is this an investigative effort? Does this have anything to do with bringing charges against unindicted malefactors? In Blanche's statement, he pretty explicitly says that there's really not a law enforcement purpose to this. So this is some sort of a political or public relations enterprise that's geared at, I think, getting information out to the public. It is a very odd, and dare I use this word, unprecedented deployment of the Justice Department to be sort of a public information bureau for Donald Trump's base, as opposed to having a fact-finding or law enforcement characteristic to it. And then on the flip side are all the various intertangled relationships that the Trump Justice Department, including Blanche himself, has with the attorney who's representing Maxwell. It's just an enormously odd and unpredictable situation.
Just to say a little bit more about that, Glenn.
Well, David Marcus, Maxwell's attorney in this matter, who is imminently meeting with the Justice Department, is a friend of Todd Blanche's. They're both criminal defense attorneys. The Blanche appeared, I think, on Marcus's podcast in the recent past. And the statement that Marcus posted on his Twitter account confirming that Blanche reached out to them praises Donald Trump for the way that he's pursuing this investigation. This does not seem, at least on its surface, as any sort of an interaction that will produce a result that is contrary to anything that Trump wants or expects in the wake of this Wall Street Journal report. So it does not seem, it is very much a parallel to what happened on Friday, when the Justice Department under Bondi announced or petitioned a judge to release the trial transcripts from the Maxwell and Epstein grand juries, which are themselves extremely narrow and unlikely to produce any results that would point to Trump, which is, after all, the big question we all have right now.
And let me do as I have done every day, quote Kash Patel, quote, House Republicans, put on your big boy pants and tell us who the pedophiles are. Do we think, Claire McCaskill, that is what Todd Blanche is going to come out of his meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell and tell us?
Let's make sure we understand that Ghislaine Maxwell is a pedophile. Under the law, when you are a co-conspirator, when you act in concert with someone, you are guilty of the same crimes. So she is just as much a pedophile as Jeffrey Epstein is. So first, the Trump White House thinks it's a good idea to go down and make cozy with a convicted pedophile. I don't see how that helps him politically. The only way it helps him politically is if she can give them someone to distract everyone with. Maybe she can give them someone else who's high profile. And then they can begin talking about that person, because there was a cast of characters here that were abusing these underage women, that were sexually assaulting underage women, women that were too young to be able to give their consent for any sexual activity. That's the essence of a pedophile. And so that's what I think is happening, is they're trying to see if she can serve up someone else besides Donald Trump. That's the only thing that makes sense of them doing this. And I just have to say this. I heard Tom Winter talk about this and previously on our network today. Why isn't anybody talking to the victims? Why isn't anyone talking to the victims? The victims are people who can tell the story of what happened. They can name names. They can, in fact, bring forth more of the information that the public, the Republican MAGA base, is craving for. So it's very weird they're choosing to go talk to a pedophile who's doing 20 years in prison for her crimes instead of talking to the people who were victimized by, ostensibly, according to this conspiracy, a cast of powerful people.
Well, Tara, in fairness, the New York Times over the weekend reported on one victim's account and her reporting to the FBI about seeing Donald Trump in Mr. Epstein's office, where Mr. Epstein says, quote, she's not here for you, end quote. And her younger sister, who Yeah. So tell me how you see this move or tell me what you think is going on at a broader level.
I agree with the senator that they should be talking to the victims. The victims also have case files that they filed, their civil suits. A lot of them have their own lists of men that they've been trafficked to. But we live in a culture where we don't believe women, right? So you could easily find out more about John. There are tons of leads. These women are sitting on troves and troves of evidence that they are more willing to give up than Ghislaine Maxwell. In a lot of cases, they signed NDAs with some of these men. But I would think that in a criminal investigation that would be thrown out the door. There are so many directions this case can go in. It's a decision of whether you want to go there. It seems like they want to sweep it under the rug. And also, they can go and talk to Ghislaine Maxwell and then say, yeah, her information is incredible. She's a criminal after all, right? Can we really believe her? That's what they can say. Or they can have a private conversation with her and hatch some sort of deal so that she doesn't serve all 20 years in prison. I personally believe that Ghislaine never thought she would serve all 20 years. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein thought he would serve time in 2019 after he only had to spend time in a county jail the first time around. These people believed they were above the law. They acted without impunity. They paraded young girls around and treated them like they dehumanized them. These are not normal people. And so I could see this going so many different ways. I'd like to see the record of the conversation that Todd Blanche has with Ghislaine Maxwell so that we know what kind of conversation they're having. I mean, they could hatch a deal. She could, maybe say the right thing, wink, wink, nod, nod. She gets a pardon at the end of this. Ghislaine Maxwell is holding on to her secrets because that was her power. That is the thing that she's holding on to. Otherwise, she would have done a plea deal.